The evidence of climate change and its origins in human industrial activity has convinced the vast majority of the world's scientists, and is accepted in reports by research teams. Yet more and more scientists are skeptical, not necessarily about global warming, but about its origins in human systems. Subscribe to the channel. Scientists have pointed to flaws in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change (IPCC) evidence collection, affecting, for example, the predicted rates of melting of Himalayan glaciers, and the rate of decline of Amazon forests. Whether it's our fault or not, new data from NASA has revealed that the Earth is drifting off its axis. The Earth out of its axis. Since 1980, Earth's north and south poles have shifted by about 4 meters. The poles are where the planet's axis of rotation, the invisible line through the center of Earth's mass around which it rotates, crosses the surface. Scientists warn that the Earth is moving away from its axis and that the worst is yet to come. But your geographic locations are not fixed points. As the Earth's axis moves, the poles also move. A study published last month found that the Earth's axis began to shift so dramatically in 1995 that the direction of this polar drift changed and accelerated considerably. The researchers found that the culprit for this shift is melting glaciers. Scientists compared the Earth to a top. If the weight of the top is evenly distributed, it should spin perfectly without swaying to one side or the other. Quote, but if some of the weight were shifted to one side or the other, it would shift the top's center of mass and axis of rotation, causing it to lean towards the heavier side as it rotates. The same thing happens to the Earth when the weight moves from one area to another. Sometimes changes in the distribution of molten rock in the Earth's outer core can alter how the planet's mass is distributed. The way water is distributed on the Earth's surface also plays an important role. So if the glaciers in the polar regions of the planet melt and the water joins the ocean, the weight of that water will spread over a different area. The Earth leans towards the heavier side as it rotates. This redistribution, according to the new study, is the main driver of the polar drift that scientists have observed in recent decades. The trend started around 1995. Before the mid-1990s, satellite data showed that the poles were slowly moving south. But then they turned left and began to drift eastward at an accelerating rate, moving about 1/10 of an inch a year. The researchers found that the average speed of pole drift between 1995 and 2020 was 17 times faster than from 1981 to 1995. This acceleration aligns with the accelerated melting around the North and South poles, which was driven by the planet's rising surface and ocean temperatures. Greenland appears to have lost more than 4.2 trillion tons of ice since 1992, raising global sea levels by 10 centimeters. Subscribe to the channel. The rate of this melt has increased sevenfold, from 36 billion tons per year in the 1990s to 280 billion tons per year in the last decade. The melting of Antarctica's glaciers is also accelerating. In the 1980s, Antarctica lost 40 billion tons of ice a year. In the last decade, that number has jumped to an average of 252 billion tons per year. The new study suggested that changes in the amount of fresh water stored underground also affect polar drift. Once this groundwater is pumped to the surface for use as drinking water or for agriculture, it eventually flows into rivers and oceans, redistributing the weight of water on the Earth's surface. According to the British newspaper The Guardian, almost 20 trillion tons of groundwater have been withdrawn from the Earth since the 1950s. The dangerous effects the data offered is really worrying and alarming, but the question is, what effects will this have on life on Earth? The shield can be compromised for centuries as the poles move. The shield can be compromised for centuries as the poles move. According to some scientists, the recent shift in the Earth's axis will not affect our daily lives, but it may slightly modify the length of our days. The Earth takes just under 24 hours to complete one rotation. But the movement of its axis, and therefore of its poles, could add milliseconds to that turning time, making our days a little longer. Now, not everyone is convinced that this is the only effect. Earth's magnetic field protects our planet from dangerous solar and cosmic rays, like a giant shield. As the poles change places, or try to do so, this shield weakens. Scientists estimate that up to a tenth of its normal strength can be consumed. The shield can be compromised for centuries as the poles move, allowing negative radiation to move closer to the planet's surface for that long. Earth changes have already weakened the field over the South Atlantic so much that satellites exposed to the resulting radiation suffered memory lapses. This radiation is not yet reaching the surface. But at some point, when the magnetic field wanes enough, the story may be different. Daniel Baker, director of the Atmospheric and Space Physics Laboratory at the University of Colorado Boulder, one of the world's leading experts on how cosmic radiation affects Earth, warns that parts of the planet will become uninhabitable during a reversal. The dangers will be devastating streams of particles from the Sun, galactic cosmic rays, and intensified ultraviolet B rays from a radiation-damaged ozone layer, to name just a few of the unseen forces that can harm or kill living things. And the dangers aren't just biological. The North Magnetic Pole has moved away from the Canadian Arctic, solid blue line, towards Siberia over the past century, but this has accelerated considerably in the last 20 years. The North Magnetic Pole has moved away from the Canadian Arctic, solid blue line, towards Siberia over the past century, but this has accelerated considerably in the last 20 years. The vast cyber-electric cocoon that has become the central processing system of modern civilization is in grave danger. Particles of solar energy can pass through the sensitive miniature electronics of the growing number of satellites circling the Earth, severely damaging them. The satellite timing systems that govern power grids are likely to fail. Electrical transformers can catch fire massively. As the networks are closely linked to each other, the fault would spread across the world, causing a ripple effect of blackouts that could last for decades. No lights, no computers, no cell phones. Even flushing a toilet or filling a car's tank would be impossible. And this is just for starters. But these dangers are rarely considered by those whose job it is to protect civilization's electronic pulse. More satellites with more miniaturized, and therefore more vulnerable, electronics are being put into orbit. Solar storm will reach Earth and could damage the electrical grid as increasingly interconnected, despite the increased risks of solar storms. Therefore, the displacement of the Earth off its axis is much more than we think. Unfortunately, we built our civilization's critical infrastructure during a time when the planet's magnetic field was relatively strong, regardless of the field's tilt toward anarchy. The field is not only turbulent and undisciplined, but at this point it is unpredictable. Great changes are on the cusp of happening. The question is humanity truly aware of the events that are about to take place? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications, to receive new videos. Thanks.